wherever you are in the world. Can you all see and hear me? If there's anyone out there watching this dear program that we try and put out every night just to keep people sane, good evening, DD, Janet, and English Warriors. Evening, sharing now. Well done. I apologised, it was on late. Juicy and Lucy and the rest of them. Let me have a look and see if I can go and share this while I'm talking. Not sure that I can, but here we go. Content. Why did Scott... Oh, there you go. I'll go and put this out there to everyone. I am going to have a very brief conversation. Let's have a look. About Nigel Farage. So if you want to have and hear what I've got to say about that, I do think there's some, somewhat amusing. I don't think any of it's amusing anymore. Not that I ever thought it was amusing. Hello world. Let me just make sure we're out there. Right. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Hit the like button, subscribe, and sharing is caring. And remember what it is that we do. Bring some form of sanity to this insane world. So, I've been inundated with people saying, what do you think about Farage and what he's done down there? I've been inundated with a few people, well, not inundated, 3 people have asked me, are you going to stand in Clacton? The answer is probably not. Not that Restore Britain have already said they're not standing, so anyone could go and stand down there. But it seems odd to me, but not odd in another way, right? Of what's gone on. Farage is a political operator. If this had gone the other way and he had just waited for the Standards Committee of Parliament or whoever they are to suspend him for 10 days or more, there would have been a gearing up for an election petition. And I think that would have been a lot worse for him. Instead, what he's done, he's voluntarily resigned. He spoke about his wealth, and he is very wealthy. I mean, when you've got people dropping 5 million in the back pocket, you can consider that to be pretty wealthy. When they're telling everyone they did it for no other reason because that they like him, there's plenty of people out there that like me, but no one's ever dropped 5 million in my bin. Right. But by the way, anyone, if there's anyone out there that wants to drop me 5 mil, you're quite welcome. No strings attached, right? So what's the key points, really? The key point is this. If I've got to be careful how I word this because it's not complex, but it's very subtle in the way that it works, right? There are, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, there's not going to be a second election, which some others are suggesting there will be. So people are suggesting that there's going to, but this Standards Committee is going to continue, and then so if it continues or it doesn't, right? My personal opinion is no point, right? Because he's actually provided the remedy to the electorate, and he's standing up and saying, "I'm not guilty of anything," right? And I think that electorate will accept that. And I think they'll re-elect him. But, and it is a big but, some people are suggesting that the Standards Committee, right, are going to do something in reference to. Let me just make sure. I've got my phone off because it's peeping in my ear roll. Let me see if I can pull this back up. Right, so I want people to understand what's going on. This is my feelings of what Farage has done. He stuck his hands up and said, you know, your system's so complex. My private life's my private life. I accepted 5 million off someone well before I was an MP, etc., etc. All the, whatever nonsense he comes out with, I'm not particularly bothered about any of the nonsense that he's coming out with. My point to you is that by doing what he's done, he has preempted the remedy that the Parliamentary Commission on Standards could have put forward, right? So there's two elements to that. One is they could have suspended him for 10 or 14 days. I can't remember which one it is, right? 10 or 14 days, and that would trigger or could trigger a parliamentary recall petition, right? So they think it's serious enough to suspend him for 10 to 14 days. That is a trigger for the electorate or someone in the electorate to say, well, we're gonna have an election recall petition. And then you've got to get 10% of the electorate. So the electorate, say roughly 70,000 people, you've got to get 7,000 people to sign a petition. And that then triggers a by-election, which he can stand in, right? So what he's done is removed all of that. So he's removed the potential remedy from the Standards Committee. He's removed that because he's gone all in and said, "I'll tell you what, I'll resign." He's gone one step further. He said, "I'll pay for the election, right? And it's not going to cost the public any money. It was my mistake, right? If you call it a mistake, it's a mistake, it's an error, whatever you want to call it, right? But I've resigned." So he's already created the remedy that could have been a slow process with the Standards Committee. I think that's quite clever. Because the others, so Restore Britain are not. I don't know how well Restore Britain would do against Nigel Farage in Clacton, right? Unless they was backed up with full support of someone like Douglas Carswell, like coming over and campaigning for someone like Charlie Downs, for example, standing in that seat, and then Douglas Carswell flies in and says, "I support this candidate. This is a young man of the future. He stands for England and our Constitution." And because Douglas Carswell is talking about the Constitution, the English Constitution in America, right? But I don't even think that's going to happen. It is strange, some of the things I'm seeing. Doesn't appear to be any. I might be wrong. Any major force standing against him. It's almost like they've all stood down. And then someone else said to me today, "Well, is that still an election?" Well, if no one stands against him, so there's no other candidates at the nomination. So when they declare the nominations, if there was only one candidate that's been nominated, and it's Nigel Farage, not a single vote needs to be cast. The returning officer would declare him the MP for Clacton, and he's still beating the system. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way. I do think, because even if one single independent stands against him, there was a guy there, I can't remember, there's something Mac, that was ousted by Nigel Farage, if he stood as an independent, there would still have to be an election. The difficulty would come if reform people in Clacton said, "Fuck this, we're not going to bother voting," and other people come out to vote. I don't know, for Binface, for example. So if Binface was standing and everyone wanted to see a Binface sitting in Parliament for Clacton, and Binface got more votes because reform voters just said, "We're not happy. We're not going to come out and vote for you." Then his gamble, he's gone all in, right? But it's my personal opinion. It's my personal opinion that there won't be a second by-election for the simple reason, and if people are thinking that there's going to be one because the committee investigation carries on, even though he's resigned and then being re-elected, it still carries on. It may or may not carry on. By law, it may be able to carry on. But certainly in law, the remedy has already been provided by Nigel Farage. He's resigned and technically been going to be re-elected, right? So that's why I don't think there will be a second. Not unless, of course, Binface wins. If Binface wins, and then stays and draws a month's salary, and then resigns, then there'll be a second by-election. Or if someone else wins and decides that they don't really want to do the job, they only done it for the crack, and then there'll be a second one. But it's not, what I'm trying to say to you is it's not going to be caused by the Standards Committee, Parliamentary Committee for Standards. It's not that. Then if they was to try and suspend him after he's and suspend him for what, I think the worst they could do is say you need to apologise, and he could say I've already apologised and I resigned. That's the biggest apology you can make, and they re-elected me. So I don't think I think there's some strange things going on. And there's a lot more stranger things going on. So can we park that conversation? Because I don't really want to be talking about the whole reason he did it is because he wants everyone talking about him. So I don't really want to waste any more time talking about him. Does anyone want to carry on talking about the Farage? I can see the whole country getting behind Binface. Listen, if it was Farage and Binface, I'd vote for Binface, right? Right. It wouldn't be I do not consent. I would vote for Binface, right? I'll be out there leafleting, putting leaflets through the door with Binface at the door, right? That'd be a proper protest vote if I've ever seen one, right? And I can imagine everyone, when he comes out of that returning office, right? And he's been carried by the local bin men on their shoulders, right? There are so many depictions in my imagination that I can see where bin man makes it. Farage is not going to walk away from Gravy Train. This is a trick. I don't know if it is a trick. The only thing that he's succeeded in doing is removing the remedy from the Standards Committee. He's done it himself. It's a bit like committing Harry. Yeah. Let's hope you don't put a bin in its place. Ace Joes, who's Binface? Who is Binface? No one knows. He always wears a bin over his face. Bin face is all right, though. Not that I spoke to him. Although I have spoken to the Monster Raving Loony Party, and they are adamant, right, that it should be made unlawful to have curly chips, right? And I think, and I don't think they're wrong. Curly chips are just wrong. A bit like having pink minis.
Pink what?
Minis. Car. Mini Cooper.
Oh, pink mini.
No, not a mini. What did you think I was talking about? She thinks I'm talking about a mini. A Lala. She calls it a mini. I'll call it a Lala. A Lala. No, not a pink Lala. There she goes. She's off again. Jack Boat, you would be pissed off if Binface turned out to be Tony Blair. Not really, because he has to use the name on the ballot paper, and the name on the ballot paper is Binface. So we'd all be calling Tony Blair Binface. They interviewed Binface. He gave a good account of himself. I bet he did. Buddy Moore, Kew Gardens. Right. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Don't forget to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to get over 10,000 subscribers on Rumble. So if you're on YouTube, you know, that thing that's cooperating with the government and going to stop people, you know, you've got to give your ID, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Give them a big fuck off and come over to Rumble. Subscribe to the Full English Show. Well, any other questions before I move on to the classic subject that I know you've all been waiting for, of Scotland and why they joined the Union and what they did, because I'm going to go through a lot of this stuff. Let me go through as much as possible. So before we go any further, I'll read from my notes and explain, and then I'll probably go through who's this one? Let me have a quick look. I have got to go and find this on there, so I will go and find it. Not that I've got it. That's the historical one. Did I show you that last night? I won't do it again though. I'll have to show you another one, which is I've still got to find it a bit on the hurry up. Let's go for the stressful element. I'll tell you what, let me go and find it on the profile. We've already gone to that. That was worth a watch. The Northern Photographer. This quite a bit going on there. Let me go and find him. Yeah, that's only the short one. There's another one. I can't find it. All right, let's see if I can go and find it. Not sure if it'll be on there or not. Don't go anywhere. I am trying to do it now. Right. Right, so I'm going to read this one out. You'll have to excuse the language in this, not mine. This is the angry bootneck. But remember, he is a Royal Marine Commando. He's not a rubber dagger, and he's not a bandy. And he's certainly not a cook. He likes his beer too much for that. So what I'm going to do now don't know what's going on there. Oh, here we go. I'm going to move this over and show you, all right? So what's the language of this one? So Angry Bootnut says, seriously, this dopey cunt is willfully ignorant. Scotland tried to colonise Panama, went bankrupt, then voluntarily joined with the English because of debt and colonised dozens of countries successfully. His bio says he's a fan of history, but he doesn't know any, right? And this is this abstainer. He's got 31,000 followers, right? As a Scotsman, I just can't root for my colonisers. So he's suggesting England are colonisers. And then there was some other comments on there. But what I've done is give a brief of this. And then what I'm going to do is talk through and show you the book as well, right? But in a nutshell, Scotland wanted to create a trading company via the African Company Act at 1695, needing to raise 600,000. It needed the English to provide 300,000. We said no. Scotland then changed the mission statement of the company, the trading company they had created by Parliament, right? From trading company to colonising South America, the Isthmus of Darien scheme, right? So remember the Darien scheme, the Darien Gap, Panama Canal, whatever you want to describe it as. Scotland created this law via its 14 years, right? So it had a 14-year convention parliament. In other words, no elections, none for 14 years, right? Whereas England had an election after a year and it went into being an ordinary parliament, right? Convention parliament. They lied to King William III, and because they, by the way, so making sure people understand this, the Scots had basically, as the words of the English, they told King William one thing, the Scots, about this law they'd enacted, and that it had passed because the sceptre had touched it, so it passed into law. And when King William was told it is actually causing a lot of mischief to England, it's not to the benefit of England. I'm going to get into more detail about that in a minute, right? The major point is that King William then sacked the Scottish ministers in the Scottish Parliament that allowed its progress and lied to him, right? So it wasn't like, because a similar load of events had already happened in England, where ministers and privy councils had lied to the king, and it caused all sorts of problems, right? Anyway, so to let you know, that's what they did. They lied to King William. They seemingly forgot that Spain, listen to this, a superpower of the time, already laid claim to Panama. They tried and failed 3 times to beat the Spanish war machine that had control of that area. They got defeated by the Spanish and blamed the English because we never backed them up and we never come in with them, etc. But they was trying to colonise that area, right? By the way, the Spanish actually allowed them to retreat and leave, and they were caught in a storm after that when they left, right? That sunk some more of their ships, and it was a disaster from start to finish. Over 2,000 of their men were lost. I think these were probably the best of the best that the Scots had. Bearing in mind they were trying to colonise so the best fighting people, the best organisers, the best of a lot of things, right? So 2,000 of them were lost. And Scotland at the time was only 1 million people. So if you take 1,000 of the best people, Scotland at the time, totally, the whole revenue of Scotland in its entirety was somewhere in the region of worth. So its capital value of Scotland, the whole of Scotland, was somewhere in the region of £800,000. And Scotland ended up losing, because of this venture, 2,000 men and over £200,000. So 1/5 of its worth, right? So its actual liquid capital, it lost in one foul hit. Boom, right? They in effect created their own version by creating this Africa company, which was supposed to be a trading company with Africa, their own version of the East India Company, and it failed, right? But they changed the terms of it and instead went to try and colonize. Instead of trading with Africa and trading with India and trading with all these different areas, they went to colonize, completely changed the mission statement and what they collected the money for from people, and went and colonized or tried to colonize Panama, right? I mean, they absolutely ruined Scotland. 200 grand gone. The whole of the Scottish people, this is really important, the whole of the Scottish people, including nobles, commoners, Parliament, the Church, Jacobites, and the Whigs, all approved this mission, right? So I want you to understand that. So the whole of Scotland approved this venture. Then they lied to the Scottish people and carried on that lie until now, till today, right? They then conspired and begged the English for a union, right, including aggressive acts against the English, and they seized an English ship called Worcester in the Firth of Forth and hung its captain Green and 2 of his crew for an alleged attack on a Scottish ship called Speedy Return, right, which belonged to the African Company. All of this was a complete ruse, and the murder of its captain, right? So they said that they had attacked this other ship, they had killed the captain of the other ship, a guy called Captain Drummond, and it was a complete lie. This is being recognised now, and it's certainly in this book, as judicial murder. What do I mean by that? It was basically the mob, and they held a trial in Scotland, and the Queen of England tried to stop this, by the way, and couldn't. And they hung the captain and 2 of the crew, and the whole thing was a complete lie. The Scottish jury found them guilty of murdering the captain. Just to make sure everyone's aware, that they some years later, Captain Drummond, who they had supposedly murdered, was seen like walking about. Right, so it was a complete and utter load of rubbish. Right, it was literally they was trying to create pressure to put on England for this union. It was acknowledged then in between 1688 and 1702 that England and Scotland could not be in a political union. It was acknowledged by King William III that said both nations were too tempestuous. So they were too sort of angry at each other. And that's what people really need to know, right? So people really need to know what had happened there. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing that. So do you all understand what I'm referring to? So the African Company or the African Act was passed on the 26th of May 1695, they try to raise somewhere in region of £600,000. And what I'm going to try and do now is bring some of this stuff up to you, so you know. I can't go through all these other bits are all to do with the Darien Gap, but let me go to 146 and show you the book, because I want to make sure that you understand what it is that I'm talking about, right? And hopefully you'll get a better gist of what's going on. And by the way, this book has been written by a Scottish. This is a 1920 A.V. Dicey, right? And majorly, people need to understand that also a Scottish guy. Let's see if I can bring that down a touch. Not even sure if that's going to work at that rate. Hopefully it will, right? And there was loads of other things going on. But hatred towards England due to the failure of the Darien scheme, the failure of Scotland's attempt to found on the Isthmus of Darien the colony of New Caledonia, the wild hopes it aroused, the tragedy of failure, and the bitter animosity thereby excited between Scotland and England have been admirably told in the works of modern historians. The often told story ought. Let me make sure I can bring this up. To be studied in detail. Our purpose is simply to state that the facts which explain how it happened that the ill success of the effort to found a Scottish colony on the Isthmus of Darien excited in Scotland a detestation of England, which might well have wrecked for years every chance of achieving the political unity of Great Britain. At the end of the 17th and during the opening years of the 18th century, say from 1690 to 1730, the belief that the commerce and trade of a state might be indefinitely extended by the formation of huge companies endowed by law with large trading privileges prevailed throughout the progressive states of Europe. The foundation in England of the East India Company, the creation of the Bank of England, you can all boo, the gambling over the South Sea bubble in 1720, and the grand scheme about the same date framed by John Law of Lauriston for raising up a Bank of France, which was meant to confer unrivaled wealth and power upon that country, but ended by bringing ruin upon Frenchmen. This is what people don't realise, right? All belong to financial schemes of one and the same class. To these attempts, occasionally successful, but more often ruinous, to enrich a country by means of companies supported by a country's resources, belongs the scheme for the colonisation by Scotland of the Darien Isthmus. On the 26th of May 1695, at the instigation of John Patterson, a Scottish adventurer of genius, the Parliament of Scotland passed an act for a company trading to Africa and the Indies. Right, that's what it was supposed to be doing. The act was touched with the sceptre and had passed without opposition. The intention of its promoters was that the company should trade with Asia, Africa, and America. It was to be supported by a capital of £600,000, bearing in mind that the whole of Scotland was only worth 800 grand at the time, right? Half of which should be purchased by England and half of Scottish subscribers. Subscribers basically mean shareholders. The company received from Parliament the widest powers and privileges. The shares sold rapidly in Scotland and in England. On the 22nd of November 1695, the subscription lifts were closed. On that very day, the English Parliament met, and on the 17th of December, the Lords and Commons presented to the Crown an address pointing out the mischiefs which would result to English traders from the Scottish Act. In other words, they was having a dig at the English, right? Financially, massively. The English subscriptions were withdrawn, right? A nominal capital of 400,000, of which about 220,000 was actually paid, was in consequence raised by Scottish subscriptions. The plan of trading with Africa, Asia, and America was modified and turned into a plan for colonizing the Isthmus of Darien and their founding the colony of New Caledonia, which it was hoped and believed by Patterson and the Scotsmen generally would become the centre of the world's trade and bring wealth and prosperity to Scotland. For about 2 years, this grand plan was carefully prepared. On the 17th of July 1698, ships had been procured, stores laid in, and articles of trade, 4,000 periwigs among them, such as might tempt the cupidity of the natives. The whole of the Scottish people, nobles and commoners, the Parliament and the Church, Jacobites, the Whigs alike, believed in, I'm just making sure you get this, the success of the great undertaking, and the first fleet which sailed for Panama left Scotland amidst the tears and prayers and the praises of Edinburgh. One patent fact, however, was forgotten, or rather ignored, by every projector and every politician in Scotland. Spain, which in 1698 was a far more formidable power than Scotland, claimed sovereignty over Isthmus of Darien, and Scotland, in effect, from the moment that the colonists landed on the isthmus, challenged the might of Spain. Thrice were fleets sent from Scotland, and each occasion the effort of Scotland to obtain or retain possession ended in ruin. The storms of the sea, plagues on land, it was a lot of illness out there, the overpowering force, mainly malaria, by the way, all told against the colonists. Once indeed, and it is the only bright point in this tale of misfortune, a small body of Scotsmen on the 11th of February 1700 defeating under good leadership and a desperate courage the forces of Spain. This one triumph was in vain. The Spaniards beset the colony by land and by sea. The situation of the settlers became hopeless, but their courage held out. On the 30th of March 1700, the Spaniards offered honourable terms. The colonists were allowed to sail in their own ships with colours flying and drums beating, and to take with them their arms and ammunition and all their goods. Ill luck dogged the adventurers to the last. 250 deaths took place in the departing ships before they reached Jamaica. 100 more men were drowned in a storm which wrecked the ship after she had reached Jamaica. It may be said almost without exaggeration that the ships and men exposed to the risks of the Darien expedition perished, and that the futile enterprise cost Scotland well nigh of 2,000 of her sons and over £200,000, which she was ill able to spare. Well, by the way, I need to tell you something else. When we talk about 200,000 Scottish pounds, right? a Scottish pound was worth 1/12 of an English pound, right? So does everyone understand what I just said? And it was an extremely weak currency against the English pound sterling, right? Why, however, should the ill luck of Scotland have aroused animosity not only against King William but also against England? The answer to this question may be summed up in one sentence. In the eyes of Scotsmen, a hopeful attempt to plant a Scottish colony ended in disaster owing not to the power of Spain, but to the opposition of William as King of England, right? And he was also the King of Scotland, influenced by the jealousy of the English Parliament, which had no right to control his action as the King of Scotland. This feeling is explained, though not wholly justified, by the following facts. From 1695 to 1700, the acts and inaction of England seemed to Scotsmen to argue contempt for Scottish nationality and indifference to the Scottish interests. The act which in 1695 created the African Company was a Scottish law sanctioned by the King of Scotland, with which the English Parliament had no concern whatsoever. The remonstrance of the English Parliament against this act was an insult to Scotland, right? The admission of William III as King of England that he had been ill-served in Scotland and the dismissal of the ministers who had let the act pass into law was a gross neglect of his duty as King of Scotland. It meant that Scotland was to be governed in accordance with the wishes of the English Parliament. But this forgetfulness by William of his duty to Scotland was not only an insult, but a most direct injury. It was immediately followed by the withdrawal of all English subscriptions. It led to something far worse. A circular, this is really important, this part, a circular addressed to the governors of all English plantations or colonies, enjoining them to prohibit all His Majesty's subjects from rendering any assistance whatsoever to the Scottish Company, right? Not to Scotland as a nation, or to the company itself and its employees, right? Because they was trying to shaft England. Enjoining them, rendering any assistance work the Scottish Company, was forthwith prepared. This letter was not indeed issued until 1699. This fact may have seemed to Scotsmen to increase the malignity. It was an additional blow given by England when they were making their last desperate struggle against the power of Spain. Then, too, the company had a very fair chance of obtaining, at its start, help with the wealth of Hamburg. Right, so they tried to go to Hamburg to get some money as well. Yet this help was withdrawn or denied in consequence of a memorial sent in William's name to the Hamburg Senate. These imitations that the King of England bore no goodwill to Scotland's attempt to found a colony worked much actual harm and emboldened the Spaniards to attack Scotsmen who, after all, were not aliens but natural-born subjects of the King. But both would have put it in 1700 was that William, as King of England, thwarted at the wish of England the very policy which, as King of Scotland, he had sanctioned by the Act of Parliament of Scotland. Could an English sovereign have done more to injure Scotland if Scotland had still been governed by a separate king? Whether the anger thus excited was entirely reasonable is not worth discussion. That it was natural, and that it was strongly felt, cannot admit of dispute. It was rendered the more vehement because the disappointment caused by the Darien's calamity was more keen than we now realise. In Edinburgh, news of one of the victory obtained by the Scottish prowess was known before the tidings of final defeat were received. And when at last hope of success had vanished, the wrath of Scotland seemed unappeasable. Many observers must, with correspondence of Carstairs, have said to themselves in June 1700, God help us, we are ripening for destruction. It looks very like 41. It seemed as if the whole nation was likely to rise in arms against William III, as it had risen against Charles I. But the ill-starred expedition had another, and though a less notable, a more important effect. It proved to the most sensible of Scotsmen, whether Whigs or Jacobites, that the union of crowns could not be allowed on the death of Anne to continue. Hence, it resulted that Scotland was absolutely driven to choose between the following alternatives. She must either become, together with England, as part of the Kingdom of Great Britain, or else return to the position of things which existed before 1603, which is what I said, right? Go back to before 1603 because the union hasn't worked. Their kingdom as independent and as foreign to England as she had been before the accession of James to the throne of Elizabeth. In 1705, it became visible to everyone from the result of the war between the parliaments that if Scotsmen were not prepared to become again aliens in England, it would logically follow that they must accept the Acts of Union or some statute which turned Great Britain into an undivided state. And the conviction was indirectly a result of the Darien scheme and its failure. So there's a lot of information there, but I do want to go to another part, which I think is here. Where is the element that I was talking about? It was a terrible thing that they'd done to this guy. So let me just so the act received royal assent. There was a lot of things going on there, right, in 1705. This date is worth attention, for it reminds us of the transactions which illustrate the bitter resentment excited in Scotland by the failure of the attempt to colonise the Isthmus of Darien. The African Company, though through the colony of Darien was ruined, still attempted to keep up their trade. One of their vessels, the Annandale, which they were to charter for the East India trade, happened to be in England, where the ship was seized at the instance of the English East India Company. This excited indignation in Scotland. Shortly afterwards, an English ship, the Worcester, under Captain Green, put into the Firth of Wolf, and the Secretary of African Company, in revenge for the treatment of the Annandale, carried out with a body of followers a plot to seize the ship. A report arose that the crew of the Worcester had committed piracy on a vessel called the Speedy Return, which belonged to the African Company, and had murdered Captain Drummond and the crew. The rumour spread like wildfire throughout Edinburgh. Green and his crew were put on trial at Edinburgh in March 1705 for murder. Captain Green and his companions were easily convicted by a Scottish jury. There was no evidence that any of the defendants had murdered Drummond and his crew. It was never proved that Drummond had been killed. There is a good deal of evidence, though not perhaps conclusive, that Drummond had been seen alive long after the date when the supposed murder by Captain Green and his crew was alleged to have been committed. The Queen sent orders that Green and the other men convicted should be respited. The populace of Edinburgh were determined that the execution should take place. The Scottish Privy Council sympathised with the feelings and certainly feared the violence of the mob. On April the 11th, Green and 2 of his crew were hanged. They were, to speak plainly, the victims of judicial murder. Forbes of Culloden, one of the Justice of Scotsman, attended the victims to their deaths and even carried the head of Captain Green to the grave. A more fearful example of mob law never occurred in a civilised country. That's because they're not civilised. Its importance lies in the evidence which it supplies of popular sentiment in Scotland. A judicious writer adds that it is a remarkable instance of the slight communication and sympathy between the two countries, and also of English unconsciousness of the formidable condition of Scotland, that the fate of Captain Green and his crew had a little more interest in the wide English public than if it had been an affair with Algerian pirates. In other words, no one was that bothered. However, this may be, Scottish statesmen had learned the lesson which the English Parliament meant to convey to them by the Aliens Act. Right? There was an Aliens Act. The time had come when Scotland, if she would neither legislate so as to maintain the union of crowns, nor negotiate for a union of kingdoms, must try to stand alone as a separate state, and thus sacrifice every advantage which she had gained or had hoped to gain from the accession of James to the throne of England. The Scottish Parliament reassembled on the 28th of June 1705. The High Commissioner had again been changed and was now the Duke of Argyll. To use modern expressions, the Duke was Prime Minister, but Queensberry soon became a member of and a prominent member of the government. The Queen, in her letter of June the 18th, most earnestly urged upon the Parliament of settling the succession of the Crown and the promotion of a union between England and Scotland. So prior to that, basically, King William, and just to make sure you know where I'm getting this from, faults on the union between England and Scotland, right? And there is the two authors. This is an original as well by Albert V. Dicey, King's Counsel. And he was a member of Glasgow, Cambridge, and Edinburgh universities. Robert S. Wright, CBE, Historian Royal for Scotland, Professor of Scottish History and Literature in the University of Glasgow. Right. So basically, what they've done, and again, if you have a look on there, I've gone quite a way through this and reading certain elements of it. Let me hear that back. Tell me what your thoughts are. Do you understand that when I start talking about we should go back to 1603 or pre-union, right? And what they're saying is we should really go back to pre-1603. You have completely separate entities, right? Put a border in there. Go back to there being tariffs, and do it exactly the way President Trump is doing it.
I made you another cold one.
That's cold. How could you make cold coffee?
You want another one?
Oh, please. It's good to me. This is a non-sugared drink. So I want to know what people think of that. Let's go right away to the end there. Yeah, I still want to abolish a union too much money going over Adrian's wall. I absolutely agree. People don't realise there's more money going over Adrian's wall to Scotland than we was actually giving to the European Union. Chuck money. If we part company with Scotland, will we then give only 1/12 of the value of the pound to them? Chuck money. That is really funny because that's been part of the discussion in the past. Because their pound, the Scottish pound, wasn't worth anything. They don't produce anything, right? The only way that they can really make their pound worth anything is to produce oil, and they're not doing that. So working out the value of a Scottish pound, it can't be pegged to an English pound. Not that ours is worth much more at the moment. It's certainly, I don't think the exchange rate would be 1/12. But you are right to ask that question, and that was asked of the SNP before when everyone was speaking previously in 2014 about secession and going back. But really and truthfully, what this book highlights, Jar, where I say we should go back to Union of Crowns, what the book says and what the experts on the subject of the time were saying, you need to go back prior to 1603. You need two separate, and I agree, and there's a reason why I agree. You need two separate kings and two completely separate administrations. You shouldn't have a shared monarch because that monarch can't keep, and you've just seen it, can't keep an eye on both sets from two separate parliaments or even a single massive parliament with all these laws being produced. They can't go through them line by line, which is what they're supposed to be doing. Well, a Roman law system, they just touch it with a scepter and it's law, right? The common law don't work like that. The king can veto in England and should do if anything is unconstitutional or adversely affects the subjects of the realm of England. Now, one of the things they didn't want to do, didn't want to be called aliens again, right? As far as I remember, and I might be wrong with this, I've got to find out. Whilst the Scots were regarded as aliens prior to 1603, because you've got the Aliens Act, right? I don't think the Irish were. Certainly the Welsh weren't. From 1536, the Welsh regarded as the same rights as the English, or subjects of the same crown. And as far as I know, Ireland was the same, right? So the Irish were not regarded as aliens, but the Scots were, because it was a completely different king. So you can tell me what you think in the chat. Give me a chat and tell me what you think. Chat money. We are two separate nations by law. End of. I agree. But so the object is: do you think you should do what these experts at the time were saying? Go back to prior to James I. Let me have a look. Evening, Chuck Money, Kew Gardens. I know so many skilled English people trying to start their own business, but the amount of hurdles they have compared to immigrants is getting unreal. I agree with you entirely. All of the barriers to the English setting up in business or even trying to earn a pound note is absolutely disgusting. They hate us. The British hate us. One is God's law and the other is Roman law. Simon Lacey, let me have a look. Will. Scotland, the opportunity. Did everyone see that on the screen? And it's a bit more difficult to read out from the book, and I've got to try and set it up properly so you can see it all. But you find it better with me opening a book, go to the pages, and you know that it's coming straight from that book. It's an original book. I always find that much better because you're not looking at scanned images, you're not looking at photographs, even though I put the photographs up and you can read through it. I always find it slightly better, but you tell me because you're the audience. Sharing is caring. Yeah, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button. So like the video, whatever platform you're on, share it, whatever platform you're on, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. But if you're on Twitter and you're on YouTube, come over to Rumble and hit the subscribe button for the full English show, right? You've only got it's very similar to YouTube, except there's no ag, right? What we're trying to do is get over 10,000 subscribers. Thank you, Patriots. We just need 28 more thumbs up until we hit the 100 target. Let's see if we can go over 100 likes while I'm live. So it's now 9:10. We've got our Alaskan friend on there. Texas is now considering deleting property. Hang on a minute. Jason, Texas is now considering. Let me have a. Texas is now considering. Pin. Texas is now considering deleting property tax so you can really own it. Okay. Texas is. I love Texas. And for the EFO-nats over here that all started slagging off Texas, they got no clue about tax. I kept saying to them, have you ever been there? Oh, it's full of foreigners. I said, why is it full? There's loads of Mexicans there. I said, well, it was originally part of Mexico, right? But their constitution is English. Well, the whole of America's constitution is English, but the common law of England is enshrined in the 1836 Constitution of the state of Texas when it declared independence. And you're talking about the Alamo, and they actually fought for independence. And they was completely, it's called the Lone Star State. They was completely independent, United States of America. Why they ever went in with the US, I don't know. I mean, they're big enough, and they've got access to the sea. They've got ports. They've got everything. They didn't need to do what they've done, really. But the only real freedom that goes down in layers is a allodial title, which means you own it. There's no law external, but only your own law. It's called an allodial title. The next one down to that is fee simple absolute. The next one down to that is like leasing and all sorts of other nonsense. So if they add, and they still got a number of places in America where you can get a allodial title, but the thing that a lot of Americans and even over here, I think it's completely wrong what they're doing over here. If you've paid your mortgage, right, you shouldn't be paying any form of tax whatsoever on that any form of property tax, whether it's local taxes, whether it's what they now called council tax, because all it is a way that you're still renting. You shouldn't be doing that. Florida is also considering the same. Oh, really? Let's put that one up there again as well. Let's see. I've just tried to put that up. Florida is considering the same. Property tax is a sneaky form of rent, if you ask me. No, Dan the Lionheart. No, it is. Chuck Money. Have shared on X. Donations. Let's have a look here. Jason. 690. The only difference between renters and owners, only with property taxes, you can make a profit on move compared to the renter. I guess if Scotland had its own monarch, what was that one? Let's see what that one says. Hang on a minute. I guess if Scotland had its own monarch, it would be Catholic, Graham, being ruled by Roman law. That would be part of the problem, because they would have to work out or agree the succession line. June Gower. Look at the tax the king wants off the Cornwall residents, and it's a bloody piss take. I haven't seen what that is. Dan the Lionheart, we should all demand a receipt for what's been stolen and paid. I think everyone should demand their money back. June English. Thoughts on the union between England and Scotland. Well done, June English, for putting that out there. Let me have a look and see what else is coming up there. Let's come off that screen. Anyone got any questions that they want me to whack up on the screen? Wessex 777. Graham, can you give any reason at all why every foreigner or foreign country that sucks on the teat of England hates us? Only the fact that they're communist and they don't like a capacity. They don't like people. I mean, I don't think anymore. If I'm honest, I don't think we are a capitalist. I don't think we've been a capitalist nation probably for 150 years. But when we was a capitalist nation, you see us started taking off. You've only got to look around the country. All of the major cities and all them buildings that we built 200 years ago were all privately funded. I've got 3 years on you. Let me have a look. They'll have another 14 years to try and sort out Catholic King. Treason big time placed on. Yeah, no, it is. Chuck Money, indoctrination by the British state. They're simply encouraged to hate us as well. I mean, if you've got, and again, I've seen it. More and more people have saying it. I see a guy the other day that was talking to the police with a loudspeaker and said the people are going to turn on you, and when they do, no one's going to help you. And I agree with that, by the way. I do agree that people are going to turn on the police. I think they're going to turn on the judiciary. But more and more, we need to be talking about the judiciary has more than assisted with what's going on today in this country. Indoctrination by the British state. Let's have a look. See, anything else coming up there? Dog King. Don't forget, sharing is caring. Juicy and Lucy. English Constitution Society. Makeshift. How do you feel about buying up an area and moving into it? Question for Graham. The fact that I ain't got no money don't help. You can't buy something you ain't got any money. But if a number of people, you'd have to attempt. So, Patriotic Alternative have bought an area of Wales, right? But unless it's a local title, you can't run it and then say to everyone else, this is that. A bit like the place that they've got, I forget what it's called now, Orania in South Africa. I mean, I wouldn't like to be them because they're surrounded. But you've got to have a local title, and then you just say, this is our own sovereign element, right? It's our laws. You have got no jurisdiction here whatsoever. That's what a local title means. Probably Scotland will cheer on the Norwegian team on Saturday. This nation is, in my opinion, under a state of imposed Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, no, it is. I've said that a million times. People have got Stockholm syndrome, especially the British. Again, I've put it out on a number of occasions. I've left it up there for people to go and view it. I am going to try and do a continuous readout every day of a little bit of history so people understand where it comes from. Spooky Bubba question, Dragon, is your timepiece 40? What does that mean? Is my timepiece 40? No, why? It says 21:17. I have Hill 100% overnight. If anyone would like to organise hosting an ECS seminar in your area, please contact Lucy on PR team, blah, blah, blah. Chuck Money, Merlin 1215Q. Hello, Merlin. Let me have a look and see if anything else is coming up. But it's really, we've got to try as much as we can to get everything start moving with the seminars, going out and talking to people. The problem is they keep getting cancelled. Not keep getting cancelled, but it's a risk that you're going to drive there and they cancel. So you need something in writing from the place to say, like, this is about the English Constitution, and they accept that that's what you're doing. 12:15Q. Anyone out there? Right, that's it. I am going to say good night, God bless. It is 21:18. I've covered everything you need to. Any other questions? Try a seminar in Yarmouth. Yeah, it's a fair old trot from here, though. Right, I'm off. Don't forget what I believe in. The Constitution is the solution. Did everyone enjoy that about Scotland? There's a load more, I tell you.